Hi, this is Arthur. You're listening to Two Brats Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Podcast Network. Enjoy!
Are you listening?
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I am on today with two people from the Missouri Community Action Network. We have Jessica Hoey, who's the Director of Public Affairs and Community Engagement. Hi, Jessica.
Hi. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. And Evan Melkersman, who is the Community Action Poverty Simulation Project Manager. Hi, Evan.
Hi, Kelly. How's it going?
Great. So I am excited to talk to you guys. I had told our listeners that there would be some follow-up things from my trip to Netroots, and one of those was that I had run into one of your colleagues and heard about what you're doing and was really excited about it. So let's start with sort of a just background kind of question. What is the Missouri Community Action Network, and what are some of the kinds of things that you're working on?
Sure. So first of all, we'll start with just community action in general. So community action is a nationwide movement. There are about 1,000 agencies all over the United States, and they serve almost every county in the United States. So it's a really great movement that was started in the 1960s that was born out of the work of President Lyndon B. Johnson and Sergeant Shriver. And that is where the concept of the war on poverty came from, and was really born also out of movements similar to the civil rights movement, and really thinking about the types of supports that people need, but also the opportunity to give folks who are in poverty a platform to have their own voice and to be able to move toward economic stability. So no matter where in the country folks are working at in community action, everyone is very much focused on moving people toward economic stability and providing them with a voice so that they can choose the options that are best for themselves. So here at Missouri Community Action Network, we serve as the statewide association for the 19 community action agencies that exist in the state of Missouri. Our agencies do provide services in all 114 counties and the city of St. Louis. And in Missouri, St. Louis is considered not a county, but just the city of St. Louis. So we always say that. And our agencies really do fantastic work. There's about 3,000 staff among the 19 agencies. And so our role here at Missouri CAN is to support those agencies in doing their work. So we provide training and technical assistance to the 19 agencies and best practices in their customer or client service provision. And we also serve as a voice for low-income Missourians, whether those are people that receive services at our community action agencies, or whether those are people who are low-income Missourians that may not be accessing services from a community action agency. So we really serve a dual purpose here at the State Association, and we have multiple programs that we provide here, and one of those, of course, is our Community Action Poverty Simulation, and Evan can certainly talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so just before we jump in on that, can I just ask just sort of a follow-up what some of the other kinds of services that you provide are, just to sort of give people a better sense of, people who are accessing these agencies, what sorts of services they're getting?
So at the 19 agencies here in Missouri, there's some really familiar programs that people probably have heard of. One of the main ones is Head Start. So many of the Head Start grantees in the state of Missouri are community action agencies. Not all of them, but a significant number of them are. So that's a program that I would think almost everyone is familiar with. That's really a wonderful program. There's also something called LIHEAP, which is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. So that program, also a nationwide program, helps people who are low income. If they have a shortage in the amount of money, they might need to pay one of their utility bills in a given month. And so folks can go to a community action agency and apply for that assistance through the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. Agencies also provide something that we call weatherization. So, for example, during the winter months, many of us might try to weatherize our home and prepare it for the elements. And what we have found is that many people who are low income or live in poverty end up paying a significant high amount in energy bills and utility bills because the homes that they are in have not been weatherized. So many of our agencies provide a service where they will go out, they will do an assessment of the home to figure out where there is energy gaps, and then they will weatherize that home in order to help make sure those utility bills can be less every month. There's also workforce development programming. This is just really a snippet of the programs that organizations provide. And the way I really like to describe it is that it's really on the spectrum of any kind of service that someone might need who might be living in poverty or who might be low income to help them move toward economic stability. And the great thing about agencies is that they understand it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So they'll do an intake with a new customer or a client and really work with that person to figure out what kind of supports that person might need and have that person help them take the lead on what types of services they might need the most. And if for some reason one of our agencies doesn't provide those services, then they can certainly connect that person to other organizations in their local community that might be able to help them with those services.
Excellent. Yeah, so then, Evan, can you talk to us some about the poverty simulation? What is this? How did it come about?
Yeah, so I'll kind of start at the beginning. The poverty simulation was first developed by a faith-based organization right here in the state of Missouri in St. Louis, and the organization was called RAL, and that stood for Reform Organization for Welfare, and that organization was established in the early 1970s. And their primary mission was to advocate for the poor by working for administrative and legislative changes to America's welfare system at that time. And two members of that group actually are the ones that saw the need for education as crucial to shoring up the political will necessary to support their efforts. And so it's with this mission that they really developed the first iteration of what's now called the Community Action Poverty Simulation. And RAL's program at that time was used mainly internally. So they traveled to various groups to provide the simulation in conjunction with their advocacy efforts. However, in the early 2000s, the organization was looking at disbanding, and they needed to find a new home for their poverty simulation. And so Missouri Can, or we were called MACA back then, the Missouri Association for Community Action, we already had a relationship with RAL, and so we ended up purchasing the rights to the curriculum, and then we made updates to reflect the contemporary realities of our community action clients, copyrighted the program, and then began selling it to the public in 2004. And also in that same year, all 19 community action agencies in the state of Missouri acquired the kit and started doing poverty simulations all around the state. So that was kind of how it was born and where we're at now with it. But at the poverty simulation, at its most basic, participants are given the opportunity to simulate a person living in poverty. It is very interactive, it's immersive, and it gives participants only a glimpse into the structural barriers, as well as some personal and emotional repercussions people in poverty face. And the simulation is really designed to shift the conversation about poverty from unfeeling statistics to human realities. And it's really just merely a tool to open our hearts and our minds. And so the simulation starts with what we call a pre-brief and an introduction of the simulated community. The community that they live in is called Realville, USA. And the purpose of this pre-brief is to really establish a psychologically safe environment for the participants, to orient the participants to the room and the simulation environment, and to create shared norms, values, and expectations for the time that they're going to spend together to prepare participants to fully engage in the simulation experience. So the participants in the simulation live in poverty for a simulated month, and the month is traditionally made up of 4 15-minute weeks, and during those 15-minute weeks, it's up to the participants to ensure that their family has all of their basic needs taken care of, including food, shelter, clothing, education, and health care primarily. The simulation experience then wraps up with about a 45 to 60-minute debrief where participants are able to begin processing the experience. They also begin to develop a shared understanding of the experience and to formulate any common strategies necessary to address poverty in their own community. And the debrief portion of the simulation is the most important piece of the entire experience because that's really, again, like I said, where they're able to begin to process the experience and really move the experience into actionable steps within their own community.
So who are the kinds of people who are often going through this? I know that now you're sort of trying to get more and more people to go through the poverty simulation, but what are the kinds of groups that come? What are the expectations that they have going into it?
I mean, there's all kinds of groups. Just off the top of my head, there's high school students that go through the poverty simulation. We do a lot of kit sales with universities around the country, and a lot of their students, primarily medical-focused students, will go through it. So nursing students, dental students, MDs will go through the poverty simulation as part of a broader curriculum that they're doing within the university. But, we also will have, civic organizations, church groups, community leaders, business leaders, really anybody and everybody that you can think of group-wise has participated in a poverty simulation across the country and around the world. But I think primarily their expectations, I can't speak for them what their expectations are when they go into it, but I can say when I first went through a poverty simulation, I was thinking this was just going to be kind of a lecture type series event, but I was pleasantly surprised when it wasn't, due to the fact that it is immersive. People can really walk away with a changed perspective when it comes to poverty. So I think sometimes their expectations get shattered a little bit, but in a good way when they go through the poverty simulation.
And to add to what Evan said, one thing that we've noticed, I've only been with Missouri Community Action Network for about 2.5 years, and Evan's been doing this work for 6 years before coming here at one of our agencies. And one thing that we've qualitatively noticed is that the interest of the medical community is really becoming very significant, and the number of requests we have to purchase our kit license from the medical community, whether it's for a school or for an actual learning institution or a hospital, really just seems to be skyrocketing. And we're also seeing many academic articles from such institutions about the efficacy of the simulation. So they have the resources to look at how effective is the simulation, and it's great to have those outside studies to show us a more objective viewpoint of why the simulation can be so effective.
So is there anything that either when you guys went through it or as you've been leading it, seeing other people go through it, that has been particularly surprising or something that, just was, not just sort of unexpected because it wasn't the format you thought, but that really is sort of eye-opening?
I mean, when I first went through it, when I worked at the local community action agency that I worked at for 6 years prior to coming to the state association, I don't think I had a true appreciation for the scope and reach of the simulation and the impact that it can have, across the country and around the world. So now doing this work at the association level and really working with the simulation and the direction that we're, moving the simulation in, I think it really kind of sinks in every day that this has a large impact across the country and around the world. And that's just something that I think is very humbling to me and always just pleasantly surprising. Like Jess said, the growth of the simulation in the medical community has been really surprising because, when you think about, the community action poverty simulation, you think of a lot of human service-based organizations that are going to be working with it. So I didn't really get the full impact of how deep and centered it is in the medical community around the country. So I think that was just kind of surprising to me. But Jess, I don't know if you had any other surprises about the simulation.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it a surprise, but I will say that when I was interviewing for this job, I noticed that one of my roles would be overseeing this community action poverty simulation. And having been involved in nonprofit work for many years now, I've seen many different kinds of simulations, and they're not always effective depending on how they're run and what the topic is. So I will say that I was somewhat skeptical of the simulation going in, and I thought, well, if I'm going to take this job, I really better get on board with what our simulation is. And so when I went to see the simulation being offered for the first time, and as I learned more about it in my first few months working here at Missouri Can, I was really astounded by the impact of the simulation. And certainly there's no simulation of any kind that is ever going to showcase exactly what it's like to live in poverty. There's just no way we can ever simulate something like that. But it's our hope that we can, as Evan was saying earlier, not only raise awareness, but get people to move the needle forward by taking action on poverty-related issues. And what we have found and what the studies I was referring to earlier showed is that when the simulation is done without a debrief at the end or without an effective debrief, the simulation can actually do more harm than good. So having a really effective debrief at the end is absolutely crucial to making the simulation as impactful as it is. And when we've seen that happen, we have heard amazing comments from people leaving the simulation and hearing about how they just didn't know what was in their own backyard or in their own local community. And now they truly have a much better understanding of what that looks like. And then therefore, the actions they might want to take in their local community to help make a difference. So that for me has been most impactful, is coming in with being a bit of a skeptic and then really truly seeing if the simulation is run well, simply how amazing and impactful it can be for the people who participate.
You've mentioned people in the medical community going through it, but it seems to me like the people I would most want going through this would be lawmakers. Have you seen people working in public policy, people like legislators who are going through this? And is there a way we can get every member of Congress to do this?
If you find a way, let us know.
I'll work on
it. Yeah, please do.
We have tried here at Missouri Can in the past for the State General Assembly of Missouri to get all freshman legislators to go through the simulation. And as I'm sure many other states do, Missouri has a process for freshman legislators wherein they have an entire orientation program, what it's like to be a legislator, et cetera. And so we haven't been successful in those endeavors yet, and we will be having another big election for state legislators coming up next year. And it's really our hope that as they go through that election and then we plan for the coming legislative session here at the state level, that we can somehow get on that calendar for their orientation to have many of the freshman legislators go through the simulation. And so that's something we're going to be working on. At the congressional level, we have not attempted that just yet. I think we'll start at our local state level here first. And then if we are successful at that, we would certainly like to see that taken to the level of Congress.
And I think some of our local community action agencies and others who have kits, around the country have been successful, like Jess said, in getting some of their local politicians involved. I did a local one about 3 years ago, a local poverty simulation about 3 years ago that was kind of had a pretty dynamic audience in it. And so within that, we had the mayor, we had some city council representatives, we had some county representatives involved in there. So I think there's been some success in the local, but we've got our sights set on the state and hopefully eventually Washington in the future. But it's just like any other grassroots movement. You start there at the local level and then continue to work your way up.
I think this discussion brings up a really good point, and that a lot of times people might assume that, well, we're talking about poverty and programs that will help move people out of poverty, and they might see that as a liberal issue or a progressive issue. And one thing that I think is so great about the simulation is that it really is intended for everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're an independent, you're a Democrat, or a Republican. You may certainly have certain worldviews coming into the simulation, but it's our hope that by the time someone completes the simulation, regardless of what worldview they might have or how they identify politically, that the simulation will have had an impact on them and that they will have a much better understanding of what people in poverty experience. And I think that's going to be something that's really critical as we move into the 2020 election cycle, both at the national level and then whatever state elections people have going on, as we seem to be in this phase of identity politics and having a difficult time having conversations with one another when we have differing opinions and worldviews. And that's another thing that's so great about the simulation is that it's something that everyone experiences together in that moment, and they can have a time to really connect with one another on that level, regardless of where they're coming from in life or, again, what their worldview is. And that is one of my favorite parts of the simulation as well.
Well, I know we certainly have some local politicians, at least, and some political candidates who listen. So I hope you guys are paying attention and that you will try to get this implemented. So if there are people who run organizations who are listening, or let's say, a new member of Congress who wants to get this more fully implemented, how do they go about that? How can they get these kits to do this work with their own organization?
Sure. The first way that I would suggest is that, they can reach out to us and see and inquire about if there's kit licensees in their area that already have the simulation, and reach out to them and maybe partner up and do the simulations together. If they are interested in fully investing in a simulation kit, then they can visit our website. It's just povertysimulation.net to begin the order process. And the CAPS kit costs $2,300, and it's a standard $85 shipping rate. But each CAPS kit is all inclusive and reusable. So what you'll get when you order one delivered to you, you'll get a sturdy, convenient storage container, and in that will be a director's manual with instructions about planning, promoting, directing, and facilitating the simulation. You'll get all of the community resource packets, and then in those packets we'll have all the instructions and accessories necessary for each station in the poverty simulation, and then you'll also get all of the family packets with the instructions and accessories necessary for up to 88 participants to experience the simulation. You'll also get a USB drive that contains PDF files of all the reprintable materials. So as you're using the simulation materials and they become damaged, or they get lost for whatever reason, you can reprint those materials and just replace them as needed. But once the order process has begun and we receive an order confirmation, and then they sign the license agreement, and then we fully execute that license agreement, which means that we sign it on our end as well, and we receive payment, then we will contact our printing company the same day to request shipping. And usually we give ourselves about a window of about 4 weeks for the kit to get there, but we do use FedEx Ground, so it sometimes is a little sooner than that. But a lot of organizations will receive it, within 5 to 7 business days once we get all of those materials in.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that there are going to be a lot of people who could find this very useful. It seems like, thankfully, there's increased conversation around poverty, even, all the way up to the national presidential campaigns. So I hope that people are really taking this seriously and thinking a lot about the services, the public responses, all the kinds of things that we can be doing a lot better to help people who are living in poverty.
Absolutely. And I mean, it really speaks, the numbers really speak, because, we now have about 2,500 kits across the country, several, in Canada and overseas as well. So like you said, people are interested and they are willing to invest in a tool that is designed to open hearts and minds. But I think the most impactful thing about the poverty simulation is not even the experience itself. It's what occurs afterwards in the community. So like Jess was talking about, it gets people, regardless of background, together and really focused on a social issue that has been around for a long, long time. But it gets them that experience and that foundational understanding, and then they can move to action within their own local communities to help end it in their communities, in their state, and then hopefully eventually around the country and around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is such a great time to have the conversation about poverty, as we've been saying, because of the upcoming election. And I think one thing we're finding that we've seen in the poverty advocacy movement, or anti-poverty advocacy movement, I should say, is there's been a lot of attacks against public assistance programs in the last couple of years. And even just since April, our Community Action Network here in Missouri has organized comments to the Federal Register about multiple proposed rulings to change certain regulations. So, for example, one is the official poverty measure and the inflationary measures that are used to calculate how that official poverty measure is done. And if those proposed regulations go into place, the official poverty measure would be lower than it already is. Right now, for a family of 4, I believe it's $25,750 per year, which of course is nothing to live on, particularly in one of America's larger cities, much less even a rural community. And so our network is organizing around these issues as well. And part of our work to help do that is the poverty simulation, to raise awareness about the issue, and then move people to take action about some of these proposed rulings that could be really harmful to folks in poverty. So we really hope that as more kit licenses are sold around the country and the world, that we can continue this conversation and really raise the profile or continue to raise the profile as we move into the election season.
And I think going off of that too, yes, there's definitely things at the state and federal level that need to happen when it comes to poverty. But local communities are doing some amazing things as the result of going through these poverty simulations. I mean, we hear all the time of local communities setting up, anti-poverty task force. And those task forces are focused on different elements within their own community, be that economic development, be that basic needs development. And so they're doing some amazing things. So, yes, there's some big changes that need to happen, but there's a lot of smaller kind of unnoticed things that are going on in communities that are having a profound impact in moving that needle in their own local communities. So I just wanted to shed light on that as well, in addition to the state and federal policies that we need to keep our eyes on.
Well, Jess and Evan, thank you so much for speaking with me about this. I think this is just a really, really important work that you're doing, and I was so excited to hear about it, and it's been really great to talk to you and learn more about it.
Well, we truly appreciate you helping us spread the word about the simulation and its impact. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great to talk with you today.
All right, excellent. We will put on our website information about your organization and how people can purchase those kits. So I hope people will check that out.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant-Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast.